Hey, everybody. Hope you are doing well. Listen, something that I do basically every day is I'm looking for an opportunity to see what's happening in all of the latest polls. And you guys could see here right now, there's plenty of toss up states: Georgia, toss up; North Carolina, toss up; Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nevada, Arizona, a toss up. I love this feature on Real Clear Politics, Real Clear Polling. What it is they basically take the latest 10 polls and they assign an average to those polls. And if the results one way or the other outside the margin of error, they assign that state to the candidate. So right now, Trump secured basically 219 electoral college votes. Harris is 215. It feels like neck and neck. However, there's this other feature on this website called the no toss up maps. So if we click the no toss up maps, what it does is says if the election was today, this is what the result would be. Trump overwhelmingly with the victory. Now, as you can see, according to this map, he would win Pennsylvania if it was today. He would win Michigan if it was today. And then you're like, well, what about some other states? Well, if you click on Wisconsin, okay, the last four polls in Wisconsin, it was a tie, Trump up two, and Trump up one. I think if the election was today, Donald Trump would take Wisconsin. Most polls we know actually swing a little bit in favor of the Democratic Party. And so when we're looking at the polls, I think that Trump might be able to take Wisconsin. You look at Nevada, okay? The most recent 2-3 polls, Harris won, Trump won, Harris won. I think he could take Nevada as well if the election was today. You look at Virginia. I think these most recent two polls, 11 and 8, don't line up with the 3 and 2 that were in before it. You go and you read the Christopher Newport University poll. It's kind of, in my opinion, skewed. It wasn't good data. I could be wrong. I don't know. The Hill Emerson does a lot of times seem to have good data. I just don't know what would have happened in the course of 10 days in Virginia to swing from 2 or 3 points to 11 points in Virginia. I think that that's a faulty poll, and I think I can prove it. But the big news, obviously, is Michigan is well within the camp of Donald Trump. And there's a lot of pundits today talking about this. People are saying that unless something major happens, Kamala Harris's campaign is basically falling into shams, falling into pieces. It's part of the reason why she's doing this media blitz. And the thing about the media blitz is it's not helping. It is not helping. One thing that people were saying was that she went on 60 Minutes. Maybe 60 Minutes would help her. She goes, she sits down, she gives, her answers. And come to find out, the fine folks at 60 Minutes edit her answers, which is just what they do. They edit their answers. They want a compelling television program. They've always done it. But what it did was, even though it was a harder interview than what she's used to, it created a situation where people who didn't really trust what was going on with the media really don't trust what's going on with the media, because when you listen to the actual responses that Kamala Harris was giving in response to some of the questions that were being asked, she was bumbling her way through. And maybe in the course of a 3 or 4 sentence response, she'd have one coherent string of 4 or 5 words. Well, what 60 Minutes was doing was taking that coherent 3 or 4 or 5 words and putting it as the response. And so, it just wasn't, I just didn't feel comfortable about it. And America's definitely, upset about it as well. So I want to take you to a show that I watch quite a bit. It's called The Two-Way Show. Today, Newt Gingrich was on it. Newt Gingrich is a man actually that I met once upon a time in my life. At one point, he was the Speaker of the House, and he's known as sort of like a political savant. In other words, like he has his handle on the political science mechanisms in the United States of America. And so he's going to come on the show. He doesn't talk long. He talks maybe 3 or 4 minutes, if that, but he gives a really good outline, and he gives a really, really, really good understanding of what he thinks is happening with the demise of the Kamala Harris campaign. And again, it's October. They call it October surprise. There might be some kind of October surprise happens that could sway things back into favor for Kamala Harris. But again, if things happen today, if it's looking like it's looking, things are not looking good for Kamala Harris. They're almost looking as bad as Joe Biden. Newt Gingrich actually goes as far to say this, and I want your take on it. And you can hear the way that he says it because I'm going to play it for you in just a second. Newt Gingrich goes as far to say this. He goes as far to say that Biden is intentionally trying to destroy Kamala Harris's campaign. There's a couple of things that have happened the past few days where it feels like Joe Biden might be coming out in different ways and trying to sway the electorate towards Donald Trump for no other reason than to spite, because there was a coup that happened and they overthrew him when he was the one who actually was in a situation to be the rightful candidate. Most recently, one of the things that happened was Kamala Harris was basically all over the news talking about how, in her opinion, bad the response from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been in regards to the hurricane relief efforts. And Joe Biden's asked about it. Joe Biden comes out and says, things have been going swell. That's what he says. He says, I've been in contact with the Florida governor, couldn't be handling it better. And so he's in direct opposition about what Kamala Harris says. And it's worked in the favor, obviously, of Trump, just if you understand the lay of the land. By the way, Amy Heights, Jennifer Swain, Cat Joy, woo-wee, Cat Joy with that double whammy. Julie, been with us for 8 months. Congratulations, Julie. Thank you for that super sticker. Thank you, Cat Joy. Thank you, Miss Michelle. We are totally crowdfunded. We're dependent on amazing people like you to come alongside and support us. And so I want to extend that invitation for those of you watching. Okay, so let's get into this.
We're also going to talk about the Middle East with two great guests who are joining us tonight. The former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich. We're going to talk about what's going on in the Middle East now and what might happen next. Bruce, welcome. Didn't mean to show you there. While we wait for our guests, I want to show you Donald Trump today was speaking in Detroit. As I said, we're going to show you some clips in a minute, but it's an interesting appearance because he talked a lot about policy, but he also rambled around in different places, and his capacity to make news on tax policy was in evidence. He talked about tax policy, but he also had some personal things to say about Kamala Harris. Again, we'll talk about that. The vice president is out doing her Univision town hall. Not sure the exact timing of the taping of that, and so we're gonna hope we get a clip of that before we get off the air, but we shall see. So let's start with Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, welcome. Thank you for joining. We're going to talk about the Middle East when Prime Minister Barak gets here, but I'd love for you to kind of give us your sense of the state of the race. You and I were emailing a little bit earlier today. You have a sense that matches the data that I've seen about this race perhaps moving towards Donald Trump. That's not dispositive or definitive, but talk about the things that you're seeing now in the race that leads you to believe Donald Trump may be as a superior position for the final couple weeks.
Well, I know there are a new set of polls out from the Trump Organization that show him now ahead in all of the swing states.
Yeah, let's show those. Let's go ahead and show those. Go ahead, Mr. Speaker. But
what Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich is saying right there is so important. So important. I'm going to rewind it just because I want you to hear it again.
Ahead in all of from the Trump Organization.
A couple weeks.
Well, I know there are a new set of polls out from the Trump Organization that show him now ahead in all of the swing states.
He's ahead in every single swing state. And I just went through the Real Clear polling and showed you the most recent polls. He actually is in the lead. Now, when you take the average of the most recent 10, there's a fewer, Kamala Harris is still in the lead. But the honeymoon period between her and the media has ended. And if it looks like she's going to lose, as we're about a month away from the election now, less than a month away, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a divide. The media is going to have to sort of turn on her. And if we see the media start to turn on her, then we're in a situation where we know that there ain't no way on God's green earth that she is going to rightfully win. Now, all of the mechanisms that are in play that could provide for widespread voter discrepancy, votes being cast by either illegal immigrants or people that are no longer living, if there's any sign that there could be just elements of voter fraud or something fishy with the electorate, those are things we need to keep our eyes and ears sort of tuned to. And I aside from that, again, and some kind of weird October surprise, it feels like Donald J. Trump's in a situation where things are going to work out to his favor. Honestly, it makes the most sense to me. Cat Joy, thank you so much for that super sticker. You are awesome. Awesome. Really appreciate that. Yeah, Cat Joy. She's like, please, dead people. Please, dead people, don't vote. Ooh, so funny, so funny, so funny.
Yeah, let's show those. Let's go ahead and show those. Go ahead, Mr. Speaker, but we'll put them up. But keep going.
All right. Look, I think that Kamala Harris has there's a number of big problems. One is that the two hurricanes, particularly the total disaster in North Carolina, and the reality of war in the Middle East and the reality of war in Ukraine and the reality of 20 million illegal immigrants, including increasing attention to the people coming in, the organized criminals coming in from Venezuela.
So I think what happened too, Americans got to see a very clear picture of two different responses in the time of a national tragedy. Here, Donald Trump is housing linemen at his resort in Florida so that, as soon as the storm passes, they're able to get to work and they've had a nice, comfortable sleep. And not only that, but he fed them, cared for them, and made sure that any need that they had would be taken care of. He's boots on the ground, hugging families, standing there in tears as families talk about how there used to be a house there and now there's just a concrete staircase. And so we see him moving hell and high water to try to help people reestablish their livelihood. What we see from Kamala Harris is, in the aftermath of the worst disaster that parts of North Carolina has ever seen, appearances on a sex podcast. Okay, that's what we saw. Fake photographs where she's wearing headphones that are not even plugged in anything, and there's paper in front of her that she pretends to be reading, even though we can tell they say nothing on them. So clearly just doing photo ops. When she is in the media and is having conversations or being pressed about the issues that are going on in America right now, it's almost like she forgets that Wyoming's on fire. She forgets that North Carolina is underwater. She forgets that Florida just got blown away. And she wants to talk about the issues and the things that people are not even thinking about or talking about right now. And so what Newt Gingrich is saying, listen, you want to see what swayed all of these polls in most recent history towards Donald Trump? It's because Kamala Harris had a botched response when it comes to the way that people are perceiving and looking at the national disasters. Because without a doubt, over the course of the next 4 years, whoever's in office, there's going to be tragedy. There's going to be an earthquake. There's going to be hurricanes. There's going to be tornado outbreaks. There's going to be wildfires. There's going to be potential other disasters to the likes of which we're not even able to articulate. And so her only response, sort of in defense, that I heard her talk about in the past 2 days was how terrible Donald Trump was at handling the COVID crisis. And, my opinion, he didn't handle it terribly. Nobody really knew what to expect, what to happen, what the lifespan of this thing was. Anybody that's in office is going to be accused of handling it terribly because it's a deadly disease. There's no proper way to handle it. So I think he did the best he could. And I think anybody in office, had it been Joe Biden or her or him, would have done the best they could. I do think if the Democratic Party was in office, life would have been a lot more restrictive. And I know that because at the time I was living in Illinois when the pandemic took place. I'd come to Nashville, where I live now, and visit my friends. In Illinois, people were afraid to go outside. In Illinois, people were social distancing 6 feet from each other as if it did something. They were wearing paper masks or even at times bandanas or cloth masks, thinking that it was stopping the spread of a disease when it did nothing. And you go to Nashville, Tennessee, and people were hanging out on Broadway and doing all the things that they did prior to the pandemic, trying to make sure that life was resuming. And the quality of life and the emotional and mental health of people that were living in the red states was a lot higher than people that were living in the blue states during the pandemic. And the COVID numbers were the same, regardless of the way that people responded. In red states, where people were able to go to restaurants and start their lives back and have school and church, the economy quick started. And those people had jobs and were able to focus again. In blue states, there are many mom and pop shops and restaurants that people used to go to for 50 years on their dates and with their families that no longer exist because of a failed agenda by the Democratic regime to strike fear. And you want to know what came into all those places? Big corporations and funds like BlackRock came and swallowed up all of these properties, and now nobody can even afford housing in these places. And so when I look at it and I think about what's true and what's not true and what happened, and I can't help but to say Donald Trump did a pretty good response. And so Kamala Harris going on and saying, well, you saw how terrible it was that way he handled COVID. Did you know that he sent COVID tests to Vladimir Putin? People are like, so what? Hey, Rebecca, you said, shared on Facebook, the best reel ever, illegal Chinese laughing at the thought of voting for socialism that they snuck away from. Oh my gosh, I want to see that. I mean, that's crazy, right? It does feel like Kamala Harris leans into a socialist agenda, if not outright communism. And so when she's having to go on these interviews and try to convince people that she's capitalist, it's just not working. And Cat Joy, thank you so much for that sticker. Reminds me, guys, that we do something once per show called a super sticker train. Can we start that super sticker train now? Maybe we can go after 17 on the super sticker train. I think we can get there. Listen to what Newt Gingrich says here.
All of that, I think, puts her at a difficulty because while she might be an acceptable candidate in a period of peace and prosperity, if you need a strong commander-in-chief at a time that the country is in danger, I think that she fails at almost every grounds, including just body language.
It's a great point. Hey, if it's times of prosperity and the nation's doing well and you want a leader like Kamala to inspire hope, and identity politics to make, certain demographics of people feel like they are represented well in the country, and that's the most important thing to you, maybe vote for her. But in times of decline, let's not look on the outside, but instead look at the character and courage in which somebody can lead a nation with. And Donald Trump was somebody, whenever he was in office, led peace through strength. He was strong. And, Kamala Harris was on the show on one of the interviews the other day saying that Donald Trump was actually being, she said, played like a fiddle by Vladimir Putin, blah, 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 X, Y, and Z, all these other, what she called dictators or leaders around the world. But yet it's under her regime, under her leadership, where Vladimir Putin started a war in Ukraine. It wasn't under Donald Trump's leadership. Under Donald Trump's leadership, they didn't move an inch because he threatened them. He had sanctions on them. He had protections in place that if they were to do that, their entire economy would collapse. That didn't happen under the Biden-Harris regime. In fact, the opposite happened. Under the Biden and Harris regime, our most important ally, Israel, suffered brutal attack a year ago on October 7th, and they've never been able to get out of that conflict. In fact, at any moment, it could be World War III because now Iran is hurling missiles into Israel. And there's no support, really. It doesn't seem like, from my perspective, from Kamala Harris, from Joe Biden, for our most important nation's ally in Israel. There's no support. They said there needs to be a ceasefire. No, when you say there needs to be a ceasefire, what you're saying is, oh, there needs to be the ability for this terrorist organization that is Hamas to continue to thrive. So when they get re-strengthened, they can obliterate you properly. That's what a ceasefire means at this point. Because the fine folks at Hamas, and I say that, sarcastically, they're not fine folks, but the leaders of Hamas have came out and said very plainly, very clearly, and very decisively that they're in a situation that, without a shadow of a doubt, if it's up to them, if left to their own devices, they will never choose a ceasefire. And that the charter mission of the organization, this terrorist organization, is to annihilate the Jewish race off of the face of the earth. I mean, this is a modern day Hitler organization. They want to literally annihilate every single Jew off of the face of this planet. And yet, Kamala Harris can't support our most important ally and say, you know what, we're going to stand behind you. Because one of the things that has happened is, whenever Osama bin Laden attacked the United States, we stopped at nothing until Al-Qaeda was taken care of. When pockets of ISIS was growing around the world, we annihilated them so that terrorist organization couldn't exist anymore. I mean, it's what America does. If there's a clear opposition force in the form of a terrorist group that rises in the United States, guess what happens? The United States does whatever it takes to annihilate them. When it comes to Israel, our most important ally, Kamala Harris says, no, just let them hang. Let them hang, let them hang, let them hang. And what that means is let them get re-strengthened. And when they get re-strengthened, what's going to be able to happen is that they're going to be able to properly take care of Israel. That's what it means. I hate to say it that way, but that's what it means. Hey, Julie and Cat Joy, thank you so much for those amazing super stickers. Up to 2, got 15 more to go.
She's not capable of communicating how in a way that most people would think, oh yeah, that I can see her in a real crisis doing something. I think second, she's really hurt by her record in ways that are weird. The fact that she has apparently not attended any of the hurricane briefings for 4 years, the fact that Governor DeSantis said the other day that she never called during any of the hurricanes in the years she was vice president until now, that it's a campaign issue. All of that's just a reminder to people that in a lot of ways, she was not a serious person. She didn't do her job, but she didn't do her homework. She didn't do the grinding daily things you have to do to be successful at the top. And then third, and I'm partly influenced by watching Saturday Night Live, which has the most brilliant rendition of her I've ever seen. But I'm also influenced by just watching her. I think, and I suspect you and I disagree a little bit about this, I think the dual disaster that she did badly on her own on 60 Minutes, and people were just tearing her apart the next day. Hugh Hewitt in particular just was astonishing, and how much he took apart that interview. But then the secondary story, which you and I agree that 60 Minutes has always had a tradition of editing cheerfully, which is why I refused to go on. I told them years ago, I said, I'll be glad to come on if it's unedited tape, but I will not come on if you're going to edit it. And they said, well, you're not coming on then. But given the mood of the country about the way the media has decayed, to have the two, and the both versions are now out, to have the totally incoherent version of her answering, followed by the edited CBS version of her answering, is just one more blow at two levels. One is it reminds everybody that the media who they dislike is totally for her. And two, it gives everybody a chance to see these two comparative explanations, and is just a further reminder of how incoherent she's capable of being when she's on her own. So my guess is, and again, as you know, I was wrong about the red wave in 2022. I'm cheerfully willing to accept that there are moments I've misunderstood this stuff. But my guess is that we're in the early stages of watching her collapse, and that given the objective, larger realities that surround her. One last comment, which I know you wrote me back about today. My hunch as a historian and occasional novelist is that sometime in the last 2 weeks, Joe and Jill looked at each other and thought,
Okay, what he's saying right now is the thing that I was telling you guys about how Joe Biden is like basically intentionally trying to bring the demise of the Kamala Harris campaign. Listen to what he says.
My hunch as a historian and occasional novelist is that sometime in the last 2 weeks, Joe and Jill looked at each other and thought, wouldn't it be a great legacy if Joe's the only guy ever to beat Trump? And I think the stuff he's done to undermine her in the last 10 days is pretty amazing, and I don't think it's an accident. And I would love to yield now to Prime Minister Baruch, who knows vastly more about more important things than I do. And
All right.
I'm always forward to listening to him.
Grateful for your overview. We're going to return to the presidential campaign, including some of the back and forth between the two campaigns on polling in just a minute. But because the Prime Minister's here and because that is such an important story, I want to talk to you both about what's going on in Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome. Grateful to have you back on Two-Way.
Welcome. I'm honored to be.
Okay, I don't necessarily want to sit there and go through that Prime Minister. If you want to watch that episode, just type in Two-Way to hear it. I want to go to Sean Spicer. Sean Spicer was a former press secretary at one point for Donald Trump. And so really smart. He today also is realizing that electoral map is definitely leaning in the favor of Donald Trump.
Wednesday, this is the Sean Spicer Show. We're about to do the road to 270 like no one else. Let's get into it. All right, guys, as promised, the latest edition of the road to 270 is about to happen, and you're not going to see this anywhere else. This show is going to take you state by state, west to east, north to south, red versus blue. We're going to color them in. We're going to show you where the race stands. I know you sometimes see these national polls. Oh, Harris is up by 2. And who cares? We don't vote by a country. We vote by state. And we need to get to 270 electoral votes. So we're going to do that. And the thing is, I hate to say this, no one else does this. I don't think you can find a single other place, show, podcast, cave dwelling, where this is happening. We're doing it for you, and we're doing it every Wednesday. I want to make sure you guys mark your calendars Wednesday night. Excuse me, Wednesday night. Today's Wednesday. There's a lot of people out there selling snake oil, to be honest with you, and Robert share that. Another little interesting tidbit that's not going to get a lot of attention, but when they were doing this media blitz, by the way, can you believe this? Kamala Harris goes on The View, and when asked a very simple question, name one thing that differentiates you and Joe Biden, she said nothing.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
President Trump immediately tweeted out, like, thank you. Like, these are supposed to be helpful interviews. What a bonehead. Name one thing. Think of something small. I mean, this is, again, she's so ill prepared for these interviews. It's unbelievable. And then you have Tim Walz. He's going out there and he says in a private event that the Electoral College needs to go. We need a national popular vote. Now,
I can't believe Tim Walz come out and said it. Honestly, I think Tim Walz has to be basically literally the worst possible pick as a vice presidential candidate. PBS does this thing called Frontline, and they just periodically will do like a basic documentary about certain aspects of the election process. And they did an episode on both of the vice presidents. And so I watched, it's like 2 hours long. I watched basically the Tim Walz life story, and I couldn't believe, knowing what I know now, that she picked. I just can't believe that she picked him.
I know some people think that maybe you agree with him. I don't. But the bottom line is, why are you talking about an issue that has nothing to do with what's important down the home stretch. Because you guys know that you have a disadvantage in the Electoral College. So you're already talking about changing the rules. Stack the court, change the Electoral College, make DC a state. This is how they play. Change the filibuster. When they don't like the rules, they change the game. Right? I mean, that's how it works. Because if they can't win, well, we'll just change it. They want to talk about democracy being under attack. Unbelievable. All right, real quick, before we get to the map, the road to 270, let me just tell you quickly about my friend Leo Grillo. You guys have heard this before. He is unbelievable what he has accomplished with Delta Rescue. And if you go to deltarescue.org, you'll see what I'm talking about. The guy has rescued dogs, cats, horses, birds, you name it. I love going to the Delta Rescue and checking out the videos because I always talk about like ideas, right? And like I think I have electoral votes in Connecticut go her way. So we're done with New England. Before current member of Congress, Democrat, Mike Rogers, former Republican congressman, and he was the chairman of the intelligence.
Okay, he goes on to say Trump's going to win. Let me
So
show
he
you
goes on
Megyn
with
Kelly.
Andrew Schultz, who did such a nice interview of Trump. I have to say, it was very funny. He's a comedian and he is hysterical. If you ever get a chance, watch his Netflix specials and you can go back and find our episodes. We'll get you the numbers. But I died. I laughed so hard every time I've talked to this guy. He's so like R-rated, but so funny. Anyway, so he asked Trump, they get into the subject of Trump's nicknames for everybody. Look at this bit in SOT 13.
I'm good with names, you know.
You are.
You're very good at
You are.
I mean, Pocahontas.
Yeah.
We have names.
What about and there was Tampon Tim was good. What about
Tim?
is
The
that?
problem with Tampon Tim, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
In other words,
It's a mouthful.
it's
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
Tampon, and you can't stutter it through
Yeah.
when you
No.
call it. It's really a lousy word to say.
Yeah.
But it's quite accurate, right? there are some like Comrade Kamala. It's
Yeah.
a little hard to say. She's
Yeah.
comrade because she's obviously a communist.
Yeah.
She's
Okay.
horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I call her comrade.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. But when you put the names together,
Yeah.
it's a little, you got to be able to no, you got to be able to put it out there.
I mean, honestly, like he'll talk to you about anything. He'll tell you how he comes up with the nicknames. By the way, the name of the podcast is Flagrant. Glenn.
Well, just two things about that, Megan. One is the Pocahontas thing is exactly the kind of thing I was just talking about. I remember all liberals believed that him calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas was somehow racist, when in fact he was mocking her racism for having claimed Native American status to advance her career when she in fact was not Native American. Pocahontas wasn't mocking Native Americans, actual Native Americans. It was mocking Elizabeth Warren for pretending to be one when she wasn't.
She
So you either
is a
see the
pretendian.
humor- Exactly. The other thing is, I find this so interesting, is I've seen a lot of this, having worked with Rumble now for a while and kind of delved more into this sort of subcultures on the internet. Fame is now so fragmented. There are a lot of people who have a lot of influence and a lot of fame who most people who work in mainstream media have never heard of, let alone even talked about. There's this whole kind of subculture on the internet with people who have millions and millions of viewers, way more than most people on television, and they're unknown. I guarantee if you ask most people who work in media or politics who Andrew Schultz is, they would have no idea, even though he commands, a gigantic audience, or Theo Von, people like this. It's a really interesting thing. And younger people in particular, have no idea who, say, George Stephanopoulos is, but you ask them who Kai Cenat is or iShowSpeed, and those are their celebrities. Those are the people who they listen to. And the internet has really fragmented fame in this way that I think is super interesting. And Trump has been going on those shows, I think, oriented by Barron, who listens to them because that's who young people listen to, in a way that has been
That's a good
really
point.
effective.
That's a good point.
Barron is like incredibly involved in the campaign. In fact, the whole maneuver towards Gen Z, Barron Trump is organizing, and he's like, "Dad, go on this podcast. I like this one. You're gonna like this." And so Barron Trump might be the most consequential member of the Trump family in this election. And think about the last time that Donald Trump ran. How old was Barron Trump? Like 10 years old. And now he's like actually, being a huge decision maker for the way that the campaign is ran. That's crazy.
Well, Tampon Tim went over. He gave some speech last night and they put him next to some gamer. This is the Harris's response to the Trump appeal to young men. They put him next to a gamer who was playing the game online in a split screen next to Tim Walz. I'll just show you a little bit of what this, none of us totally understood this. Here it is.
I hear this. Oh, I don't know. I don't really like Donald Trump's personality, but I like his proposals. Which ones? Tax cuts to billionaires? Taking away women's reproductive rights? Not dealing with climate change? Not having a plan for immigration?
Okay. I'm not sure that's the same thing. I'm not sure that's going to get it done with the young men, Glenn, but that's what they're doing.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, masculinity is something that seems to be a struggle in the United States in this era. Like having real men, stand up and be leaders is almost like taboo. But one thing that I know is that young men are looking to real men as leaders. And when young men look to Doug Emhoff or Kamala Harris, which is weird that, they're married and don't have the same name. But anyways, when young men look to Doug Emhoff or Kamala Harris or to Tim Walz, they don't see someone that is masculine. Like Doug Emhoff is not a masculine person. And Tim Walz is, extremely feminine. And so basically every young man is like, we're not voting for them. We need strong leaders. And there's not one thing strong about them. And then you look at Donald Trump and he's like the epitome of masculinity in the business world. And JD Vance was out like fishing on a podcast this week. He's like wearing boots. It's like, hey, we like that. We like the guy who knows how to hook a worm, cast a reel, pull in a big catfish, gut it. Like that's what America wants right now, and at least in terms of young men. I want to play some of this episode with Donald Trump because I doubt many of you guys saw it. I watched it actually. It was kind of like what Megyn Kelly said. These people have a tendency to be somewhat vulgar at times. But Donald Trump did an excellent job handling questions and making his stances known. Mish Michelle says, love this feller, fam, this country, and Donald Trump. Me too, Mish Michelle. Me too.
Out, right? About Elon specifically, is he your favorite African American?
He's a piece of work. Okay, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's obviously a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
I mean, when I saw the rocket engines come back, I said, "What is that?" Like a couple of years ago, I've seen rockets go up and then they crash into the water.
Yeah.
And I see the engines are coming back and they're landing.
It's unbelievable.
They're landing and they land on a raft in the middle of the ocean someplace with a little dot, and they land right on the top of the spot.
And my wife can't parallel park.
I know. It's most people can't. But no, he's great. But he's got a great heart. He was with me, as you know, on the other night.
Yeah.
And we were honoring a man who got killed at a rally, Corey, firefighter, great guy. And it was a beautiful evening. But Elon went out. And he loved the crowd. He loves the country.
Yeah.
And he's picked a side. A lot of people don't want to pick a side. I have a lot of people that are big supporters of me.
Yeah.
But they won't go all out. They can't.
They're scared.
Quite.
There's
They're
a cost.
Scared. Yeah. There's a cost.
Yeah.
There is a cost, but there's also a liability. I mean, some people, I respected a lot when this guy was up there doing jumping jacks. You got to vote for Trump. You got to vote.
He was jumping high.
He was jumping high.
He looked quite African.
When he jumped, he's in good shape. I'm looking at his waist. I'm saying, wait a minute, does he work out or something? But he had a great time. And he's not out that much. He's probably maybe a little. Would you say he's a little reclusive? Possibly.
Yeah. He's also busy.
He's very busy and maybe a little reclusive. Yeah. But he had the greatest time. He was saying, "Look at these people." We had 100,000, more than 100,000 people. It was a record. It was nobody's ever seen, and it was really. It was a celebration of a life, and it was really a mega. It was a mega deal.
Yeah.
he was a big MAGA person. His family was there, and
Mm.
2 other people that were very badly hurt were also celebrated. They
Yeah.
were very badly hurt. They weren't actually expected to live,
Yeah.
and they lived, and they had incredible doctors. Some of those country doctors are better than the big doctors that we spend a lot of money on, and they don't do as good. I will tell you right now. I don't want to knock anybody, but those country doctors saved 2 people, because I was told that 3 would. No, think of that. 3 would be in trouble, and 3 were going to now Corey immediately, but the other 2 were so bad that they thought they wouldn't make it.
Yeah.
And those country doctors, they pulled them together. They did a great job.
Okay, so you're going back into this place where, you know, there was this assassination
Yeah.
attempt. They hit you, headshot.
Yeah.
You survive.
Yeah. It was not a good feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you scared?
By the way.
No, I'm not scared. You know, I have an attitude. It's interesting. It's sort of, it is what it is. Does that make any sense to you guys? You know, you do what you have to do. I felt it was important to go back. A lot of people, I guess, agreed with me because it was over 100. I think they said 108,000 people in the end. That's a lot of people.
Super Bowl.
And I had no guitar. You know, if you have a guitar, it's easy. When you don't have a
I
guitar,
thought you said Qatar.
Yeah, me too.
I have guitar. I do have that. They like me very much, but I don't have a guitar.
Yeah, you have the
right?
guitar. Yeah.
So anyway, but that was it was amazing. I mean, you know, I like it when somebody like Elon, who has a lot to lose, is willing to do what's right.
Yeah.
Some people know it's right to do, and I'm not just talking about endorsements and all, but they don't want to do things because they're
they don't want it to cost them opportunities.
The words
in
is
the future.
they want to be politically correct, and actually they're doing a bad thing. I think for themselves and for a lot of people they may represent.
Okay, opening line when you walk out there.
So,
Right.
I mean,
I was wondering what you were going to say, and as a comedian, you can seize the moment.
Yeah,
And
I think he was a hell of a comedian, by the way.
I appreciate
That's
that.
what the word is. I wasn't gonna say that.
So I hear you go. I see the video, and you go up there and you go, as I was saying.
Right.
Crowd goes fucking berserk, or what?
Sorry, I don't remember him saying the F word. I wouldn't have played it if I knew that. I don't remember him saying it again, although I did kind of skip parts of this.
They went, I would say, crazy.
Yeah.
And I wasn't
Biggest pop
sure.
you've
so-
experienced?
Yeah, I'll tell you how, you have this as a comedian or even not as a comedian, just when you make a speech, you make some very serious statement.
Yeah.
So we're at a very serious and somber thing
Event,
because
yeah.
we're celebrating a life that is no longer with us. And I wasn't sure whether or not that thing, I had it in my mind for a long time. Once I said I'm going back, which I wanted to go back immediately, I wanted to actually finish my speech, okay? When I got up, I said, let me finish my speech.
Mm.
But I'm surrounded by like 8 very large, strong
Yeah.
men and a very wonderful woman. You saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm surrounded by guys. They said, sir, no way, go. And I have blood pouring down, but I really wanted to finish my speech. I said, I think I had like 50,000. I had a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And, when I went down, it was sort of like embarrassed. I said, I went down in front of all these people. That was my first thing. I don't want to be embarrassed.
You were embarrassed that you went down after being shot.
Well, you weren't exactly sure what the hell was happening at first,
Yeah.
But also, you came back up with the fist raise. That's one of the hardest pictures.
But I was also,
Did you hear them say he's down, or were you just
so
like,
when I
going?
got hit, I assume that it's funny.
Is it?
When I was down there, it is sort of strange. I guess now it's a little bit, we can smile a little bit, but not really, because the 3 guys, 1 killed,
Of course.
2 very
What a
badly
dick.
hit.
Yeah.
But when I went down, I had total realization. It wasn't a surreal. They talked about a surreal. That could be a surreal experience. Like when something happens, some traumatic thing happens, they lose focus. They have no idea where they are. I've heard many people where that happens. Something really terrible happens
course,
like
yeah.
that. It was just the opposite. I knew exactly what had happened. I got shot in the ear, and Secret Service thought I may have been shot. Actually, they were pretty sure that I was shot all over because there was a lot of blood. Just a little fact, if you get shot in the ear, it's the bloodiest place. It bleeds more than anything else.
Oh, wow.
Now, it's good to be shot this way, not that way.
Yeah.
That way,
Yeah,
that's
not-
bad. So if I don't turn, I wouldn't be doing this right now,
Sounds
guaranteed.
crazy.
Guys, I got some stand-up shows coming up. Portland, and then we are wrapping
Let's get back to the show.
My son Don told me actually.
It really is a miracle. I mean, like the whole thing, it leads you to believe that maybe Donald Trump is being saved by God for such a time as this, you know? Cat Joy, thank you for making it roll on that super sticker train, Amy Heights. And Cat Joy, you guys are rocking and rolling. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
He's a great shooter. So is Eric. They're great shooters. They're like better than Scratch. Okay, if you use
Yeah.
And they say it's amazing because it was 130 yards. To me, that sounds like far away, but it's not. For shooting, it's not. He said that would be like sinking a 1-foot putt for just a decent shooter.
Wow.
And I don't know if you guys are shooters, but they said if you're a shooter, it's almost impossible to miss. It's that close. It's really considered that close. I mean, 300, 400, 500 yards is very doable, but this is supposed to be very close. And so he said, I think Don became more religious, actually, you want to know the truth. It had a big impact. He said, it's impossible. The doctor, actually, when I got to the hospital, they were fantastic, Butler Hospital. I get there and the doctor greeted me and he looked at me and looked it over. He said, you are the luckiest man I've ever met.
Wow.
He said, you should immediately go out and buy a lotto ticket. Can you imagine? He's telling me to buy a lotto ticket. There's blood all over the place.
Yeah.
And he said, I've been doing this for 25 years. He said, I've never seen a thing like this.
Wow.
Because it's just, just whacked it. But it was something that was, relatively not so bad compared to what could have happened. So I feel very lucky. It was an amazing experience, a horrible experience in most ways. In some ways, it was beautiful because I was somehow, I hopefully Corey's protected too, who's the firefighter, and he's in a good place, maybe a better place than we're in here, because this world is a little bit on the tough side. But it was an amazing experience.
Do you feel like a increase in your spirituality after something like
Well,
this?
maybe, especially when I'm hearing from people that do shoot and are good at it, that it was almost impossible to miss from, like a 1-foot putt.
You start to
very
believe.
hard. You got to miss it. That's a bad putt, right?
Yeah.
He equated it to a 1-foot putt. When they say that, I say, wow, that's so, you're saying, they said a bad shooter would hit you from that distance 100% of the time.
Wow.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And here I am. We're doing this wonderful interview with 4 geniuses that are hot as pistols, right? Good hearing this guy.
Likewise, sir.
It's pretty good stuff you got. So anyway, but here we are.
Who do you think tried to take you out?
So I'm going to give you some big breaking news, right?
Love that.
Because I know the kind of show and it's entertainment, but it's also very serious. I mean, I get the whole picture. And you know what? If it was just funny stuff, you wouldn't have the success you've got, to be honest with you, right?
Yeah.
It's nice to intersperse it, but I'll give you something. So first of all, I have great respect for the Secret Service and the guys that were with me. I went down and I did a good job going down because those bullets were winging over my head. If I would have been up for another couple of seconds, I also wouldn't have been here. But I didn't consider that as lucky as turning to the right at that it was like 1/16 of a second was the only time that I was safe, essentially.
Right.
If I would have gone a little further, I would have been hit. If I would have gone not as far, I would have been hit. I mean, I had like this little tiny moment. And the amazing thing is the sign is always on my left and it's always at the end. And I only use it 20% of the time, maybe even less than that.
And
this was
time
a
it's on the
chart.
right.
This was a chart on immigration because I have the record. I did a great job in immigration. They are not doing too well right now.
Stay on the breaking news. Stay on the breaking news.
So here's the breaking. So you have this shooter and you have another shooter, right? So this shooter had 3 or so cell phones. The FBI's never gotten them opened.
Wow.
Don't you think that's crazy that this shooter had 3 cell phones? They've never got them open. I mean, who knows if this guy's in cahoots with other people? Don't you think they need to get the cell phones open and figure out what in the tarnation was actually going on? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually make any sense at all. Michelle, fight. I mean, that's the rally cry of this generation at this point. You're the best, Cat Joy. Thank you for your encouragement. But I think, Cat Joy, that you are the best. So thank you. And appreciate that super sticker. Julie says, Lord, if it be your will, Trump be president. Amen to that. Cat Joy, thank you. Are you guys enjoying watching some of this podcast? I think, again, Trump is doing such a great job answering the questions.
The other shooter, 3 apps, they call them. And I believe they were foreign-based apps, from what I understand.
Oh, wow.
They haven't opened them, and they're foreign-based. And, you hear all about Iran, because I was rough with Iran, but I want to see Iran do great.
Yeah.
But I want to stop all the killing and all this. And I was rough on Iran, and they supposedly have a hit on me. In fact, I think it takes great courage for you people to be interviewing me, because it could be now,
Yeah.
They
Well,
could
we
be
didn't know
right
that
now.
before we got in here.
No, if
before.
you would have known that, you might not have done this.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, this is a good way of me getting the interview to be short.
Exactly.
All of a sudden, he's going to say, okay, that's it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Go
It's
see
been
my
great.
daughter.
Anyway, they have 3 apps, and foreign-based, 2 of them, maybe 3 of them are foreign-based. They haven't
Wow.
opened them yet. Why wouldn't you open them when you hear about Iran or when you hear about, foreign? Then the other one had 6 cell phones, and they haven't opened. Now, it's very hard to open a cell phone. Only Apple can do it in theory, unless you have somebody. But they had no problem getting the J6 people's cell phones open. They opened their cell phones very quickly. We have 2 countries in a way. What's happening here is very bad. It's very dangerous. We almost had one, because I had the greatest economy in the history of our country, and people were coming together. We almost had one, but we really do have 2 right now, and it's a shame, because I think we'll get them together. Success will bring us together, but they should get those phones opened. And, when there's an assassination attempt on a former president who's now, I'm proud to say, leading in all the polls against the Democrat, I don't know which one is running. You don't know what the hell's going on. I'm the only one that had to run against 2. I run against 2 Democrats, but this is a first. We create a lot of firsts. Usually you run against somebody. Here I run. I had the debate. I was way up on him.
Yeah.
And then they say, let's put this is like with Dana White, a fighter. So you're fighting, and the one guy's getting killed. And they say, that's okay. Let's put in another fighter to finish it off. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're fighting. You say, hey, wait a minute. I have a brand new fighter in here.
WWE.
I spent $150 million on beating Biden. And then all of a sudden I hear that they're going to overthrow him. It was a coup. I mean, it really was. But I would like them to open up these apps and find out what's in there. And so he had six cell phones. Who has 6 cell phones?
Mhm.
Having 6 cell phones is weird. I have cell phones. If I ever have 2, it's like a lot.
Yeah.
He had 6 cell phones. Why does he have them? And why haven't they opened up those cell phones?
So if you had to
And
guess,
it's different. If
Great
you're a
point.
drug dealer, I think it's terrible in many ways, but I guess from another standpoint, Apple, the primary group, people buy those phones because they will never open them for
Right.
any reason.
Hmm.
But they got them open on J6. They opened up their phones, but they don't open. And this is big stuff. This is an assassination attempt, and it could involve other countries.
There was that San Bernardino shooter that they hacked. The FBI was able to hack into the phone. Apple didn't give it up, but they were able
There
to
are
hack in.
some people in the world, very few, that have an ability to sometimes be able to hack in.
Got it.
Very rarely, actually.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing when you think that with all the genius, you almost can't do it. But Apple has a key, and the key is open. I mean, they can do it immediately.
Yeah.
But they don't do it, and they don't do it. And that's one of the reasons that, I hate to say it, drug lords feel very confident that they'll never be exposed. And they use their cell
Right.
phones, their Apple phones, and maybe it's that way with other companies. I don't know. They have Samsung, they have other companies.
Tell me what you guys think. Do you think that Apple should break into this shooter's phones and give up the information?
But it's very hard. Apple's very strong on that. But when it comes to the assassination of a president, leading candidate,
Yeah.
former president, all that, I think the rules have to go out and they have to open those things and they have to find out.
Hmm.
And
in terms of national security,
somebody would say you have
think
to either punish Apple or you have to get somebody that can do it. But in terms of national security, so the one guy has 6 phones, lots of messages to people. Who are those people he's calling when he's hiding behind a bush?
So if you had to guess, I'm sure obviously you've thought about this a lot. It's an assassination attempt. If you had to guess, who do you think is responsible?
These are great questions. What the hell?
Yeah.
I don't get these questions from the fake news.
Yeah. Rosie O'Donnell's been
Like,
asking
like
this.
Deface the Nation. They have the woman on Brennan. She's on Deface the Nation. She was terrible with the way she handled J.D. Vance, who did a great job the other night.
He
But,
did
you
do a
know,
great job.
But I don't get questions like that. Did you ever hear of the show Deface? Ladies and gentlemen, it's Donald Trump on Deface the Nation. It's called Face the Nation. They hate me.
No,
They spend millions of dollars.
Name a show that?
Oh, I see. You didn't hear it, but that's good. They spend millions of dollars on the name CBS.
Yeah.
And then I come along and I say it's Face the Nation. It's well known.
Very, yeah.
Or Meet the Fake Press.
Yeah.
You know, Meet the Press.
You're good at
I
this.
say Meet the Fake Press.
Yeah.
And they spend all this money, and then I say it once, and it goes to millions of people.
Yeah.
But no, they are fake. But some of these questions are much better.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm honored.
Much better.
You still haven't answered though.
That was the best dodge of the question.
That was almost. That's your second best
You know what
dodge
I'm
in your
trying to
life.
do?
You almost charmed us out of
I'm
it.
trying to get out of it.
All right, fair enough.
Well, look, if you look at assassinations or attempts, first of all, you realize I'm in a very dangerous business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because 1/10, think of this, 1/10 of 1% of auto races die.
Yeah.
Bull riders, I think that's pretty dangerous,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I don't know much about it, but I think I wouldn't want to be on one of those suckers.
No.
Yeah.
I see them flying off and the hoof is like an inch from the eye. And when it hits the eye, you're gone,
Game
right?
over. Yeah.
And they are very, well, it's about the same. 1/10 of 1%.
Yeah.
And other things, it's never much more than that. That's sort of maxed out, I think.
Yeah.
Race car drivers, bull riders, I think that's pretty much tough.
Yeah.
UFC fighters, it's none.
Mhm.
I don't think anyone's ever actually.
Not in UFC. In MMA or boxing,
Maybe.
unfortunately,
It must
there was
be.
those tragic events. Yeah.
Amazingly, boxers die a lot. But UFC, Dana tells me it's a safe sport. I say, to me, it's much rougher. But, it's pretty amazing. They've never, in UFC, they've
Yeah.
never lost. And they run a great operation. Nobody's died. But with presidents, it's like a substantial percentage.
Way higher than we
When
realized.
you look at Lincoln and Kennedy and this and that. I mean,
Attempts,
you go
Reagan.
through McKinley.
Yeah. Garfield.
You look at a lot of people. I'm in
Yeah.
a very dangerous
Dangerous business.
profession.
Yeah.
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 I call it a profession.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
I
a
like
dangerous profession.
I like that.
I'm sitting with you guys. You have a very nice, safe life. Me?
Yeah.
So no, if you said 5%.
I think he called us soft.
No,
Yeah,
but think
I'm fine
of
with
it. Yeah, but think of it. 5%.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's
Yeah.
high.
That's a lot.
I
And
think even the attempts is something like
Attempts?
25%.
Yeah.
Of
attempts
presidents have had
is getting
attempt.
into really
It's crazy.
crazy numbers. So people don't think of that. You run and you see, and then you win, and you're down Pennsylvania. And you're looking at everything. So you're in
That's
a
the danger
dangerous
stuff.
profession.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things. I was saying before, though, that, I do a thing called a weave.
Yeah.
And there are those that are fair that say, this guy is so genius. And then others would say, oh, he rambled. I don't ramble. If
I
I
weave.
start a story,
Yeah.
what you do is you weave things and you do it. You have to have certain things. You need an extraordinary memory because you have to come back to where you started.
Yes.
You always, a weave is only good
They
if
don't
you
give you
come
credit
back.
for that.
Yeah, it's true.
Then you could go all the way over here and then
I
get
can
back.
go
Every time Donald Trump does what he's calling a weave, I know what he's doing. He starts talking about something. It triggers a memory about, by the way, blah, 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 blah. He usually, as long as the reporters will let him, does make his way back to the original question, unlike Joe Biden, who just rambles and bambles on. Like, blah, 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 blah. Today, Joe Biden was asked about Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, and his response was like, oh, yeah, he's going to come over and help with the storm soon. That's what Joe Biden said today. At this point, it's borderline elder abuse for what they're doing to that poor man. Miss Michelle and Kat Joy, thank you for your tremendous support.
so far here or there. And I can come back to exactly where I started. Now, someday when you don't come back to where you started,
You're Biden.
then you say, no, but the weave is the way. When you're telling like a story, I was telling a story at a rally the other day in front of thousands of people. And I started off, and then
You were weaving them up.
something in the story,
Bro.
I actually mentioned Air Force One. It was Air Force One.
Okay, what I want to do, we're running kind of low on time. There's an hour left of that interview. I encourage you to go watch it. If you're interested in it, just type in Donald Trump flagrant. I want to make it through my Twitter feed, some of the things that I felt like were important to sharing. Obama sounding the alarm, basically saying black people are not excited about Kamala Harris. I mean, look at the guy behind him is actually scared.
Is that we have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running.
So he's basically saying, hey, black people are not excited about Kamala Harris.
Now, I also want to say that that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers.
He calls them brothers, as if he has that right to call them brothers. It's more pronounced with the brothers. What is he saying? He's saying black men do not support Kamala Harris, and young men are not supporting Kamala Harris and Tim Walz for all the reasons that I've already mentioned. Okay. Okay, here's the question where Joe Biden's asked about Benjamin Netanyahu.
What did Prime Minister Netanyahu tell you about his plans relating to retaliation?
He's coming over to help with a storm.
The question was, what did Prime Minister Netanyahu tell you about the hostages?
Plans relating to retaliation.
He's coming over to help with a storm.
Or his plans of retaliation. And his response is, he's coming over to help with the storm. He's coming over to help with the storm. Excuse me, if the Prime Minister of Israel comes over to help with the storm, we got problems. We've got problems. Listen to it again.
Mr. President, what did Prime Minister Netanyahu tell you about his plans relating to retaliation?
He's coming over to help with a storm.
Dear God Almighty, that is not a good situation. Donald Trump tweeting about this again. I showed this the other day. Let's show it again. A giant fake news scam by CBS and 60 Minutes. Her real answer was crazy or dumb. So they actually replaced it with another answer in order to save her or at least make her look better. A fake news scam, which is totally illegal. Take away the CBS license. Election interference. That's what he says. An unprecedented scandal. So let's see what happens.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
The second answer, obviously incredibly articulate, the kind of answer and resolve you want out of a leader. People are like, wow, maybe she does have her head on straight about these things. But her first answer is like, blah, 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 blah. Let's support Hamas, blah, blah, blah. Basically, word salad, word salad. This has to do with a hurricane. I don't really want to play this totally, but you guys can just see this is what happens during a storm surge. Everybody have eyes to see? Let me zoom in a little bit. You guys have eyes to see this town, and I'm going to fast forward, but watch what happens. Again, these are horrible atrocities happening right now. This whole town goes under. I mean, look at that. That little restaurant and bar gets washed away. This is the storm surge above the palm trees, my brothers and sisters, above the palm trees. The water goes above your palm trees. We need to be praying for these people. This is another response during that same press conference.
He's coming over to help with a storm.
Mr. President, have you spoken before President Trump at all?
Are you kidding me? Mr. President Trump, former President Trump, get a life, man. Help these people.
Will you hold him accountable? You said you were going to hold those accountable.
Public will hold them accountable. You better than the press hold them accountable because you know the truth.
Do you plan to speak with former President Trump?
No.
I mean, what the heck is going on? This is the weird. Watch this again. This is the weirdest press conference. I mean, look.
About his plans.
Number one, you could tell he's like triggered or he's in one of those moments. Like sometimes Joe Biden's brain works a little better than others, and then other times he's just way out in left field. He's way out, way out in left field in this moment. I mean, I hate to say it. This is a mashed potato brain moment. It's what I call it. He's not always that way. There's times where you hear Joe Biden talk and you're like, okay, he's not as bad as I thought he was. But I don't know what triggers it. I remember just different people in my church over the years turning senile, developing forms of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and they have good and bad moments. And when they have bad moments, there's nothing you can do about it. When they have good moments, you cherish them. He's in a bad moment. And I don't exactly know, what his diagnosis is. But he's obviously in this moment in a bad thing. He says Benjamin Netanyahu is going to help with the storm. Donald Trump's helping tremendously the situation with the hurricane. So nothing he's saying right now makes sense.
Releasing to retaliation.
He's coming over to help with the storm.
Look at their face. Like that reporter's face is like, she didn't say Netanyahu was coming to help in the storm.
Mr. President,
Look at her eyeballs. She's like, did I just hear what I thought I heard? It's like, how could the press at this point be surprised by what comes out of his mouth?
spoken with former President Trump at all?
And then he calls him Mr. President Trump. It's like, oh, he's the president. He forgot that Donald Trump's currently not the president.
Are you kidding me?
He giggles. Are you kidding me?
Mr. President Trump, former President Trump, get a life, man. Help these people.
Will you hold him accountable? You said you were going to hold those accountable.
Public will hold them accountable. You better than the press hold them accountable because you know the truth.
Do you plan to speak with former President Trump?
No.
I don't even know what he's meaning. I'm sincerely, even if I try to see it from the Democratic perspective, I don't know what he means by Benjamin Netanyahu's helping with the storm. And I don't know what it means by Mr. President, former President Trump, get a life. Don't know what he means. I do not know what he means. Here, Donald Trump is making an announcement about car payments. If you are somebody that has car payments, those are now tax deductible.
But this is what you've been waiting for, because today I am also announcing that as part of our tax cuts, we will make interest on car loans fully deductible. So
I don't know if that's that helpful, to be honest, because like under Donald Trump's plan, most of the people that have car payments are not paying federal taxes anyway, so they don't really need deductibles. Here's a clip from the show that we were just watching.
Where they, still become ambitious and successful.
So I do have good kids and 5 really wonderful children, and different, very different. Yeah, they are so different. But one thing that was in common that I always used to say when I was with them or when they were leaving a room, I would drive them crazy. No drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes. I would say that.
Did you say that to Don Jr.?
Yeah, Don's a little wild. He's a wild. He can be a little tough.
He told me a funny story.
Go ahead.
Okay. I talked to a bunch of people. I was trying to, prepare for this interview.
Right.
He told me a funny story. And he said to me, he goes, once he asked if he could have a couple of his friends over for New Year's. Was it New Year? No, it was July 4th.
Right.
On top of Trump Tower.
Right.
And you said yes. He's like, I want 5 friends. You're like, okay, I'm out of town. Go for it. He brings 200 people over to Trump Tower. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. He says that you weren't supposed to be there. You end up showing up. You hear some noise upstairs. You come up. You go, what the fuck is everybody doing here? Get the hell out of my house. He said he cleaned for the next 36 hours. And he said, to this day, you have never brought up that it even happened. And he said, I'm starting to believe it might not have happened. So can you give him closure?
No, it happened. No, I can never give closure. You can never forget.
He said, it happened. It happened. Okay. If you're a Christian and you're setting out this election because Donald Trump is not sufficiently pro-life for you, congratulations. Your decision will result in more dead babies. Do you know that 10 states have the most pro-life laws ever thanks to Trump? That will go away if Kamala wins. Pregnancy centers will now be under assault. Pro-life activists will be under constant threat of legal assault. What about the hundreds of thousands of kids who are trafficked over the border? Vote like millions of lives depend on it, because they do. They do. Okay, guys, that's all we have time for. I normally pray at the end of streams. I'm not going to pray today at the end of the stream, and here's why. I made an urgent request video, and I pray at the end of that. And as soon as I end this video, I'm putting the link in the chat, and I'll put it in the first comment. Please click that link, go watch that video, and leave a comment on that video, because I believe it's actually me on a stage. I'm sharing from my heart about some things that are very important. It has everything to do with what we're talking about. And I actually believe it makes a huge difference. And so I'm going to end the video right now. Click that link, go watch that video, and I pray at the end of it, comment on the video. That way I know that you watched it. Okay. Thanks, guys, for being on the stream. And we'll be back again very, 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 very soon.